Welcome to the Holding Time podcast. Here we discuss breastfeeding in all its complexity, the ups and downs, the challenges, the triumphs. Whether you're expectant, a new mother, or simply interested, I hope you'll appreciate the incredible warrior women who are featured in this series.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I have two children, a 4-year-old called Max and a 7-month-old called Leo.
And how was it with Max, the first time you tried breastfeeding? Did you try it?
I did try and I managed to feed him to 39 months. I stopped when I got pregnant with Leo.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'd never planned on it going on that long, but yeah, it did. So with Max, I decided I wanted to breastfeed. Didn't do any research into it, thought it's natural, I'll just know what to do when the baby's born. Like really naive and found it quite difficult when I had him. So I had an emergency C-section, so he was quite sleepy when he came out and I was a bit frazzled and not really kind of with it very well. And I had quite a lot of support in the hospital to get feeding established. And I thought it was going well, but it was very painful for quite a long time. And I got quite a lot of support, but never really got over that kind of pain. And I just told myself I wasn't going to quit on a bad day. So I didn't and kept going. So yeah, I carried on feeding him till this one happened.
So was it your first son that was tongue-tied? Or?
So both actually. So, well, Leo was diagnosed with a tongue tie, but Max, looking back on it, the experience I had was very similar to the one I had with Leo. And looking back at like the photos of him, crying and like videos, he definitely had a tongue tie, just wasn't diagnosed.
Yeah, you see it, don't you? Like the tongue doesn't come out. It's extension and elevation.
Yeah, he never...
Actually, not that hard to diagnose. I don't understand why so many women, what's the tongue tie service like up there?
So I had Max in Stockport and the breastfeeding support was really good, but they never really looked in his mouth or checked that. They always checked how I was feeding him and kind of never got to the bottom of it. But this breastfeeding, so I had Leo in Liverpool and the breastfeeding support here has been fantastic. Even though I had him during February's lockdown, they had the Bambies came round on the ward and checked everything was okay with him. And they were really happy with my position and everything. But I still had quite a lot of pain. And I got regular text messages from them. And after I think the second day, I was like, this isn't right. So I had a telephone call with a breastfeeding support worker. She got me to send a video of this one crying. And she looked at the video and was like almost certain he's got a tongue tie. And because he had jaundice, they referred him really quickly and got it snipped at day 5. It was fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that was
the difference afterwards. Yeah.
That was during COVID.
Yeah. Honestly, I can't sing praises well enough of the midwives, postnatally and the breastfeeding Bambies and the tongue tie service. So I couldn't believe how quickly it got sorted. And it made such a difference straight away as well.
The breastfeeding rates are pretty low in the area. But do you see women breastfeeding around your area? Is it?
No. They're saying that at the baby groups, you did see quite a lot of women breastfeeding, but as he's got older and the babies I've been with have got older, it's kind of decreased.
Why do you think women drop off?
So for me, I think that the support's not there for women. And I know I had amazing face-to-face support, but I don't mean the support services. I mean your family and kind of just society understanding how demanding breastfeeding is. So I don't think women are educated properly antenatally to prepare themselves for the realities of what it is to have a newborn baby. It's demanding bottle feeding, but physically breastfeeding, it's all down to you, isn't it? People's expectations of what they think is going to happen is never never the reality, because I just don't think people are told and it's not spoken about.
It's funny, isn't it? Because in like developing countries like Nigeria, I've spoken to quite a number of Nigerian women. They're like, everybody breastfeeds right the way past, up to being a toddler. And that's totally normal. And you think, God, how is it that here, where we've got all this sort of quite strong support in those early days and everything, that we just don't see that? And, I mean, you can't say women in those countries have less to do. They might have 8 kids, you can't say they're less busy, for example, or
no,
it's got to be a cultural, it's got to be on a subtle cultural level, the messages that women are getting, I think.
Yeah, and I think like when childbirth became very medicalised, and people just, the breastfeeding rate started to drop off from then, when it was seen as like having a baby was like a medical procedure, not a normal physiological thing that women can go through. And I think like with the introduction of formula, you lost a whole generation of women that just stopped breastfeeding and put the baby on formula. So you kind of lost that experience, and kind of knowledge has been wiped out from a whole generation of women. So you're not getting that passed down. Like my paternal grandma didn't breastfeed, and I think my maternal grandma didn't, and my mum tried to but didn't have the support. She was told she couldn't breastfeed because she wasn't producing enough milk. Well, in the reality, it probably wasn't that she couldn't, she wasn't supported to be able to do it. So like my mum was so supportive about me breastfeeding, but she never got to really do it herself. Until her third child, my youngest sister, and I think she managed to do it for 12 weeks until she had to go back to work. So society, we've lost that experience of what breastfeeding is and how to support women doing it.
Is there anywhere that you would suggest is a good place to feed around town?
In Liverpool, I like going, so I don't really have a problem, I'll feed him anywhere, to be honest. I like going to coffee shops, but if he's being extra fussy, and John Lewis have a really nice feeding room. They've got like a separate screen, and there's like hot water and stuff there, and it's just like really nice comfy chairs.
That's great to know. And that's in the middle of Liverpool?
Yeah, right in the city centre in Liverpool 1. That's usually my go-to place if I need to sort him out. But I'm happy to like feed in any coffee shop, I've been really lucky. I think I've only had one negative experience of feeding any of these two in public, of someone being very disapproving. And that was like the first time I fed Max in public, and my husband was like, just ignore him. I don't feel like I've had any negativity really towards breastfeeding. And I know that is not most women's experience. And I think I've just been like so lucky. What
makes you think that it's not most women's experience?
Do you know some of the online support groups? Like you hear of women receiving negative comments from people in public.
Yeah. And actually it's very, very, those incidents are really widely reported. But I went into it thinking, God, the minute I get my breast out, someone's going to start shouting at me, because that's the perception. But actually, I've spoken to so many women about this now, and I always ask, what's it like for you breastfeeding in public? And I've honestly never found anyone in doing this work that's had a bad experience, beyond something that's kind of a bit, I don't know, sort of maybe someone trying to be helpful but being a bit unhelpful.
Oh, yeah.
That type of non-help. But never have I heard of a woman having an actual negative experience.
Yeah.
And it gives a kind of skewed idea that there's like loads of hostile anti-breastfeeding people out there, and there's hardly any anti-breastfeeding people out there. There might be anti-cyclists or I don't know, whatever else. There is hostility on the street, is what I'm saying.
I think I stopped feeding Max in public when he got to about 18 months. I didn't feel that was accepted.
Yeah, I would say that's true.
And I felt it was no longer socially acceptable.
And I think also the family support drops away as well, doesn't it? And it's such a shame, because actually mothers who feed full term are so experienced and such experts by the time they've fed one child. And we've got all this sort of disapproval that comes in at that stage, that it really discourages women from going the full term.
Yeah, I stopped telling people when I think Max got up to about 18 months. I just didn't tell people. I think I'd had a few negative comments, from the health visitor, and then I think the doctor had said something as well. She was like, "You need to get your body back and yourself back, and you're not helping yourself by breastfeeding." And that was when he was like probably 12 months or 13 months at that time. And then I think the health visitor said something at his development review about him not sleeping through because I'm breastfeeding. And I was like, I'm just not telling people anymore. I had enough knowledge to argue it, but I just didn't feel like it would have made any difference arguing it. Just kind of like nod your head, and then I just didn't tell people. Tell you one thing that my husband looked at me and was like, "Are you going to cause an argument over this?" Because he wasn't even 24 hours old. I was still in hospital, and the paediatrician came around to do his baby check, and she was like, "How often is he feeding?" And I was like, "I'm just feeding him on demand. He's, it's at least probably every 2 hours, sometimes more, sometimes less." Bearing in mind, I think he was like 20 hours old at this point. I was like, he latched really well and he fed loads when he was born. And I'm happy. And she was like, "You need to start getting him into a routine. You should only be feeding him every 3 hours." And I just looked at my husband, and I think he looked at me to say, are you gonna say something? And I was like, I couldn't. I was like, do you know, just disbelief, absolute disbelief. And this paediatrician was young. It wasn't someone that had done their training 20 years ago. She'd done her training within 10 years. She was younger than me. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, no wonder why breastfeeding rates are so bad. If you're telling women this when they've just had a baby, that you should only be feeding them every 3 hours to get them in a routine.
It's completely incorrect, isn't it? I mean, it's actually the antithesis of what they should be doing.
It's harmful to be telling women that.
Diametrically opposite to what they should do.
Just absolute disbelief. And I just, I've just had a baby and I was tired and I've been up all night with him. And I was like, I can't argue this. I just was like, I'm just feeding him on demand. That was my extent of the argument at that point.
So what would your advice be to do to a new mother about breastfeeding?
To follow your instinct and to feed when your baby's rooting or crying or starting to chew their hands. Just if you're unsure, feed them.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to everyone involved, our funders, Cheshire and Merseyside Women's Health and Maternity Programme, Arts Council England Lottery Awards for their support, along with all the amazing mothers and partners who have helped to make this project happen. You can find out more about the project by visiting holdingtime.org.